As I said at the top of the show, our guest today is State Superintendent Mark Johnson. He was elected superintendent in November of 2016, and now with the State Board of Education lawsuit behind him, he's been very busy, but not too busy to come by and visit with us. So, Mark Johnson, welcome to Education Matters. Welcome back.
Yes, thank you for having me. I'm glad we were able to make this work.
I am too, particularly at the beginning of the school year. There's just so much going on. We had last week we talked about teachers, and we had a superintendent on from who you actually went and participated in their back to school things down in Johnston County. But good timing too for you to come on this week. You just had a big announcement just this week about School Safety Month and school safety overall. So tell me what you announced.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you. It is an honor and a privilege to be the State Superintendent of Public Instruction. And since I campaigned for this office, I made clear my top priorities of making sure the Department of Public Instruction better supports classrooms, better supports local leaders, reduces the amount of testing, gets better professional development out into the field. We've been working on that, but it is amazing how in this last year we have all seen that it is time that we have to take a stand and do something as a society to increase the safe environments in our schools. And that report you just discussed, that's also part of a safe environment for students.
Right.
So it's going to take all of us. It's going to take schools and school leaders and teachers. It's going to take law enforcement. It's going to take mental health professionals. And it's going to take parents and students themselves in order to really tackle these issues and make sure that every student has a safe environment in which to learn. So this is my obligation as the Superintendent of Public Instruction. It's now also personal for me. Just this week, I dropped off my little girl to start her kindergarten experience at one of our traditional public schools. It's a very exciting time. It was a lot of emotions going on when I watched her walk into that classroom, but I knew that she was going into a place where she would be loved, where there would be affection and there would be good instruction, and she was in good hands with those teachers. She's in good hands with the principal. What I expect and hope, like every parent who has a child in our schools, they will be safe, their classmates will be safe, their teachers will be safe, and that is why it has become such an overarching priority of the NC Department of Public Instruction to make sure we are doing everything we can to help improve school safety. Some quick highlights: the reason why we proclaim September School Safety Month, we worked very quickly over the summer to get additional funding from the General Assembly and to get that money out to school districts before school starts. We have more school resource officers in schools now. Those are sworn law enforcement officers. They are to protect and serve. Hopefully we never need them there for the worst that might happen, but they're there in case it does. More importantly, those school resource officers can help build a sense of community in the schools between students and law enforcement, and they can be there as a resource. But we know it's not just about those preventative measures.
I was going to ask you, because I mean, school resource officers, and you mentioned some of the discipline disparity issues. Sort of where is when you think about the priorities, where is it the mix of sort of security, school resource officers versus mental health, which I think is what you wanted to talk about.
That is exactly.
And just counseling and support overall for all children, right?
Absolutely. Preventative measures such as better security for schools, securing schools, having just getting the message out to principals and teachers, make sure we follow protocols, don't leave doors propped open, have all visitors come in through the main entrance. Those are steps we have to take. I mean, we now live in a world that no one's happy about where we are, but we have to take those steps. But more importantly, as a society, we have to address these issues where they start, and that's mental health. We have a mental health system that has clearly let us down in certain instances where students' issues have turned into tragedies. Part of that is going to mean more funding. Right. More funding for more mental health professionals.
It's not enough right now. I mean, like I know
that is correct.
I think you mentioned in your press conference, but I mean, I think it's 35. There's some grants and some one-time funding, but it's not the recurring dollars that schools need, right?
That's exactly right. It's not. And what we're doing is we're using that money to fund innovative mental health supports through the course of this school year, so that we will be able to ascertain what the need is and what some great strategies are to address these issues. And we're going to come back to the General Assembly in their long session when they're writing their budget. And we've already talked with the General Assembly leadership about this, and we will be making an ask for much more systemic funding for these priorities.
Okay, well, let's move on to another priority that you've mentioned, reducing testing. I mean, you've said, look, and a lot of folks have said they want to reduce testing, Republicans and Democrats. So I'm going to talk about it later on in my final word. You can't change federal testing mandate, but you do have the ability to work with the state board and the General Assembly on state mandates. What specifically do you want to see change? What do you want to eliminate in terms of testing?
Look, let's start big and bold. We need to reform the entire system. And I'm taking steps at the Department of Public Instruction to reform the entire system. Now, first, I'm going to be able to pick the low-hanging fruit now that the court case with the state board is settled, it's done. I manage the Department of Public Instruction. Immediately for this year, we were able to change some of the recommendations for the M-Class diagnostic tool. If there's a kindergarten through third grade teacher watching this show, they are very familiar with M-Class. We were able to make some of the requirements now optional, and we scaled back on the recommendations for how often they have to assess students. That's one quick way that I was able to give teachers back more time to do what they entered the profession to do, which is teach. The next low-hanging fruit that we're going to be working on over the course of this school year will be reforming the policies that come out of the Department of Public Instruction around how tests are administered, those end-of-year tests. I had the experience last year when I proctored.
You saw that, right? You went and proctored them.
I proctored.
Because that was something, I mean, my sister's a teacher, so I hear about it too, but it does take, it's not just the time that the students use on testing, but it takes teachers out of other classes, and then you have kids sitting, waiting for,
waiting.
Waiting, days.
The tests are too long. The testing environment is unreasonably strict. All of that adds up to undue stress. I talked to the fourth grade teacher and I proctored in her classroom. We had a discussion afterward. I said, tell me some of the things that if you could just change right now would be some of the most impactful. And she said, I am not even allowed to talk to my students about test-taking strategies before I start the test. Now, if we can change that DPI, believe me, we're going to change it, because teachers should be able to give motivational talks to their students and say, remember, we've gone through this, we've practiced, here are your test-taking strategies. Also, you're going to be seeing a push from my office to reduce the amount of time that students have to spend taking these tests in the school during the school day.
All right, let's talk about resources. I want to shift gears. You mentioned about you mentioned in the context of school safety, but just overall, look, your department has been hit pretty hard with some budget cuts. 3.2 million last year, 5 million. You had to lay off, I think, about 40 employees.
That's right.
Going into the 2018 budget session, this was, of course, during the fight between you and the state board. Y'all didn't have a common sort of budget request. Did you go in and make the case against these cuts?
I did. Okay. I did publicly, and I did in private with the General Assembly as well. There is a long history between the General Assembly and the Department of Public Instruction that led to these cuts. I did actively work to try to stop the cuts for the last school year, because I knew after we had those third-party operational review experts come in and lay out a path forward for the department, I knew that we needed to restructure the department. We needed to do more work in our IT division to better support schools and the department. We needed to restructure how we support low-performing schools, because it shouldn't just be one division in the department that is responsible. It should be the entire department that works together. It should be curriculum, working with federal programs, working with with digital learning to get those great strategies in those schools. But I also knew that if we took that budget cut, that would just be less that we had to work with to build out that structure. And that's the case I went and made. Unfortunately, I was not successful, but with what we do have, I am very optimistic about the work we're doing right now at the department to restructure to this focus where the entire department sees it as their mission to help low-performing schools.
What were are there unmet needs that you're sort of looking at where you were now? Now we're coming up on a long session, it'll be a whole new budget cycle. I mean, what are we're going to go to commercial break in a minute, but sort of your top line, what you're thinking about in terms of this is what I think I'm going to need.
Oh, well, it's not just for the department, it's for all of North Carolina schools. I mean, I will be pushing for more investment, and we've talked about this before. Innovation is not just a buzzword for me. We do have a system, and it's not that teachers aren't working hard, it's not that principals aren't working hard. We know they're working harder than ever. We have a system that was designed 100 years ago for an industrial age. We need to transform that system with teachers always have been the most important part of the classroom, always will be the most important part of the classroom, but we need to give them the tools and flexibility so that they can help their students enter into the new era of education, which will be focused more on personalized learning and students working at their pace so that you don't have a whole class that moves on if a student doesn't get the material. They'll be able to work through the content, and every student will be able to move towards a more mastery-based, competency-based learning model.
All right, well, we're going to take a quick commercial break. We're going to continue our conversation in just a minute, but before we go to break, see if you can answer this question. Out of North Carolina's 100 counties, how many will have lost population between 2010 and 2020?
Education Matters is brought to you each week in part by Paragon Bank, serving others, enriching lives.